The year was 1996, and due to the fact that I was, 9 and still in school, I just came home. But waiting for me was a postcard. A postcard for a strange game that would be coming out in the coming months. That was Final Fantasy VII. Now, the PlayStation was a relatively new console at this time, and Sony were really new on the market of gaming. So this was an exciting, cool looking image of Midgar from above. And I'd never heard of Final Fantasy before because I, growing up, never had any of the Nintendo consoles until the SNES. So I never really bothered getting JRPGs or things like that. I'd never played Chrono Trigger, for example. So there was lots and lots of games that I had not had the privilege to experience at this point. So Final Fantasy, being a completely brand new experience to me, intrigued me. And a couple of months later, not at the January release date, but usually, I'm fairly certain it was in the summer of 1997, I purchased a copy of Final Fantasy VII and played it to death. Now, I am not one of those people that's going to tell you that Final Fantasy VII is the best Final Fantasy game, or even the best game ever, because I just don't believe it. I honestly think Final Fantasy IX is the best of the PlayStation era Final Fantasy games, but at the same time, I don't think it's even my favourite game of all time. I think Suikoden takes a massive dump on it. There's just so many games out there that are really good, but I played Final Fantasy VII to death. It was a game that I played so many times through to find all the secrets, did all the cool stuff that you can do in there, like getting the gold chocobo, Knights of the Round, defeating both the big weapon bosses, getting all the ultimate weapons, just finding every single secret that could possibly be found in that game. And it has a lot of fond memories for me. The music, the soundtrack, everything. So when it was announced that Final Fantasy VII was getting a remake, I was incredibly excited and incredibly disappointed because obviously it released on the PlayStation and nowhere else. But with it releasing on Steam, I had the chance to play it, and I'll be honest, I slept on it for such a long time to the point where this review is sort of a little bit irrelevant because everybody knows what happens in it and all that kind of thing, but I feel like I like making videos and I like sharing my opinions, so that's what we're going to talk about today. How I feel that Final Fantasy Remake plays and how it is true and how it isn't true to the original series. Either way, if you enjoy these types of videos, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. Now, obviously, Final Fantasy VII Remake, the game that we're talking about today, is a remake of Final Fantasy VII. But it's not really a remake of Final Fantasy VII because it changes a lot of the narrative points following the same basic story, but it's also, the first game is set in Midgar and the events of Midgar that lead up to what is essentially a very, very early part of the original game. It's still technically an early part of the first disc of a free disc game on a PlayStation game. Like, I honestly think you could get through Midgar in about 8, maybe 10 hours in the original game, which, if I'm being generous with it, is about an eighth of the actual length of the game if you go and complete everything and do everything that you can do. So, it's such a small part of the game, but it is actually quite an important part because it sets up the general and whole premise of the original title, where you are these eco-terrorists or environmentalists that are waging war against this massive mega corporation that is essentially bleeding the planet dry. And the story and the general gist of that is still there. The whole narrative of you versus Shinra is a very, very important thing in the remake game. And what it does incredibly well is it expands upon the plot and gives characters that had relatively no depth a huge amount of depth. And I mainly direct that towards Avalanche. Now, in the original series, Tifa and Barrett were the two Avalanche members that you would meet deal with, and then subsequently spend the rest of the game with. But the other three Avalanche members, Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, they were kind of comedic, like, foils. They would say stupid things, do silly things, and you didn't get a huge amount of dialogue out of them. You didn't get a huge amount of backstory, and you honestly didn't get a huge amount of time with them. A couple of hours into the game, they would all inevitably die. Yeah, I know, spoilers. It's a freaking 30-year-old game. Coming up for 30? 20-year-old. It's a 20-year-old game. If you don't know the story of Final Fantasy VII's original game, that's on you. But either way, they die. And in this game, there is a lot more depth to them. You get to learn about them, you get to speak to them, you get to spend actual time with Avalanche. And the problem with that being is that if you've played the original game, you know what's coming. You know what's coming with them, and you're sitting there the whole time going, oh god, this is making this so much worse. I actually care about these characters. If they die, I'm going to be so annoyed / upset. Oh god, oh god, oh god. And when the inevitable does sort of happen, because it doesn't happen, like, the story of this game doesn't happen exactly how it did in the original. And you're spending this, you just end up stressed about these characters. Like, I really like Jesse. I really like Biggs. I really like Wedge. I don't want them to die. So there's this whole, like, thing where you're just stressed out by the fact that you can taste what's coming. And that's what makes this game so good. It gave narrative significance to characters that, I'm going to be honest, were narratively significant in some sense, but weren't really filled with the same amount of emotion and care and love that you would have for a character in modern day games. They expanded them. They made them narratively compelling characters. And anything that happened to them, and I'm not going to go into the whole of it, is heartbreaking and tense, and it gave me real emotion. And granted, if I hadn't played the original game, I don't think I would have felt the same level of, oh god, and stress and emotion from it going throughout the game until the events actually happened. I think I would have maybe just went, oh, these guys are really nice, I like them, and then, no! You know, it would have turned into like a kind of sudden and a shock and a plot twist and all these horrible things happening. And I feel like playing the original game really adds to playing the remakes. And the reason for that is context of what should be happening versus what is happening. And this is a kind of plot point, and it's a spoiler for the game. The story of Final Fantasy VII Remake is basically an alternate reality and timeline of the original series. And the game actually touches on that the timeline is being manipulated and altered and changed. So events that are supposed to happen don't happen. And these spectres appear to try and stop you from altering the timeline. And ultimately, at several points throughout the game, they fail and have to retreat because you beat the crap out of them. This game is a retelling. This is a sequel to Final Fantasy VII. This is not a remake. This is a sequel. Or rather, it's a remake in the sense that the timeline is being remade. And this is an incredibly cool and nice aspect. It leaves the original game to exist as it exists, and you can go back and play it and gain a lot more insight and knowledge and understanding of what should have happened in this game. Like, playing Final Fantasy VII's original game actually enhances the remake, because you know exactly what should have happened, and then when it doesn't happen, you can see how it's changed the way that the world and the game is. And that is such a cool concept that I think I wouldn't have appreciated if I just played this game as it is. So I think this game encourages you to go back and play the original. Granted, I'd love them to remake the actual original as it is, with the exact same systems the way they are, but this game is very good at bringing a story and a section of a story that maybe isn't as big as it is in the new one, and just fills it with life and fills it with joy and fills it with sadness, pain, hope. It did really well at dragging me in. The story was compelling and I love it. I actually love it. Don't get me wrong, the Final Fantasy cheesy dialogue is still there. Cloud's still a bit of an asshat at the start of the game, but it's good. Like, I really enjoyed the story of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, I think it goes without saying that the remake is, in terms of like visuals, a massive upgrade over the original Final Fantasy VII. And if you know anything about Squaresoft games of that era, a lot of the time they would use 3D models with an already rendered background. So it would be like a painting, like an actual stunning visual that your character would maneuver the environment in, but essentially it was a 2D image with a 3D character roaming it. And I'm going to be honest, the visuals in Final Fantasy VII were fantastic. But what they've done here is managed to bring those visuals to full 3D, and the technology that we have now for video games is so impressive that I remember seeing certain sections in certain places, and my brain would immediately flip an image of what it looked like in the original game in my head. The nostalgia of the visuals just brought me to tears, and countless occasions I would just sit there and enjoy looking at it, because this game is so embedded in my psyche. The visuals, the different things, the different enemies. I'd be like, oh, I remember that guy. Oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember what I did with this thing. And it would just trigger like memories. It was like a trip down like nostalgia road. It was memory lane all over again. It's just every single little thing. And again, if I hadn't played the original, the visuals wouldn't have had such an impact in such a profound way for me. I wouldn't have seen Seventh Heaven and thought, oh, that's the bar. I wouldn't have seen the freaking pinball machine in Seventh Heaven and immediately known that has a thing that goes downstairs to the Avalanche's secret hideout. You know, there's so many different little things that would just trigger fun. One of the things that pops into my head, it's the part with Aerith or Ares, and you're going through like a junkyard, and there's like a crane, this yellow crane, and this arm, this pink like robot arm. And the second I saw those objects in the game, it just plinked into my head. Don Corneo's mansion plopped into my head. Wall market, any of the reactors, just all these little visuals and all these different little scenes and things popped into my head. And this is why this game has done things so well. It took the scenes and visuals from the previous game and it incorporated them in. And for people like me who did play the original when they were young, this formed the foundation of what makes me a gamer and makes me play video games to this day. And if you don't know about like the visuals from games of that era, if you've never played Final Fantasy VII, what the Squaresoft used to do, Square Enix now, is they would make a 3D character model and they would put essentially a pre-rendered background which looked like a painting. They're absolutely stunning, visually really artistically cool drawings, and it gave a lot of depth and a lot of character to the game. And because the images were so detailed and so, you know, great, they've stuck with me for years, and every single location in Final Fantasy VII Remake brought those images to my mind, and they improved upon it. Like, honestly, the visuals in this game are so stunning, and the character models, everything about it, just brought so much, again, nostalgia and meaning to each and every little detail, from character costumes to freaking like just debris in the background. Like, honestly, there's debris in the background that I've looked at and I went, I remember that. I remember that crap being there. And don't get me wrong, there's bits and extra stuff that didn't exist in the previous game. It's not like they took the map and the visuals and, you know, one for one translated it. The game would have been a lot shorter and a lot smaller if they had. But it's just the little things that were just sort of there, but not really that important, that add to this and pop into your mind at the most random points, and you just stand there and appreciate the look of this game. Now, from visuals, we move to the soundtrack. And this game has an amazing soundtrack. And I have to reference the original Final Fantasy VII game once again, because a lot of the music in this game is a one-for-one remake or remaster of the original score. And there's nothing like the feeling of entering a boss fight and all of a sudden it starts going da 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 da. One of the best boss themes of any video game I've played. And to this day, like, honestly, it brings so much hype, so much adrenaline to me. And the soundtrack is fantastic. And it never, ever fails to impress. On top of this, you've also got these CDs and discs that you collect throughout the game that have different variations and renditions of many of the game's songs and music in general. And it's just a cool little feature that you can do and collect different things and do different things throughout the game. Soundtrack wise, yeah, I think, I don't think you get the full appreciation of it and the full nostalgia punch to the gut that you do if you played the original game like I did. But even without, I can't think anybody's gonna find this music to be disappointing. And it is very reminiscent of the 90s. Like, the way that the tracks are set and the way that the music sounds is very 90s sounding in terms of video games, at the very least. So it doesn't feel like it's modern music, even though it is, because it was made in the last couple of years. But it is very effective. And I think the soundtrack from the original game to this day still holds up to an extent. But even more so when you put these new versions of the tracks in its place. Now, before I go into the gameplay of Final Fantasy VII Remake, I'm going to talk about the DLC, because there is a DLC for this game. It's relatively short, only about 6 hours at a push, and it follows the path of Yuffie Kusaragi, who's one of the main cast of Final Fantasy VII's original game, but is an optional character. Honestly, one of my favourite characters growing up. I was really into tomboys, so that's why I always kind of liked her, and she was always a mainstay in my party. She wasn't one of the best characters, but she was one that I really enjoyed because she's a kleptomaniac nutter. And she was just cool. I liked that character, and I still, to this day, like Yuffie. She was definitely one of my favourites. So actually getting to see what she was doing before the events that she actually appears in the original game was kind of funny, kind of interesting, and I really liked it. In terms of the gameplay, it's much of the same from the main game, but we'll get into that in a little second. And that second has come because we're going to talk about the gameplay. Now, when it comes to the combat in Final Fantasy VII Original, they used a thing called the ATB system, the Active Timed Battle. Now, what this would do is your ATB bar would tick, come up, and then you'd be able to use your abilities with each character. And depending on the way you've built your characters, some ATB gauges would move quicker than others. So in some instances, you could maybe attack 3 or 4 times, or using a spell 3 or 4 times before the enemy could even move. And you'd have multiple different characters that could do different things. On top of that, you had your materia, which you would slot in. Materia would level at a kind of rate per battle, and you could essentially be able to use lots of different spells with lots of different things. And that's sort of still in this game. However, the ATB system has been replaced by a new ATB system, where this game has now become a action-orientated RPG. You can constantly attack enemies and swing and do all kind of stuff like that. And this builds your ATB cage, which then allows you to use your abilities, which you have just melee abilities now, as well as your materia. And unfortunately, I feel like because of the way that the gameplay works in this game, it's lost a lot of the charm from the original. I'll flat out say, I prefer the combat from the original Final Fantasy VII. And that's because I'm not a fan of action JRPGs in general. I just don't find them as engaging and fun, and I don't think about what I'm doing as much. I usually just spam the crap out of the attack button, use an ability, spam the crap out of the attack button, use the ability. And on top of that, what I felt in this game, and granted I didn't play it on hard mode, but I felt a lot of the time I was just cheesing the bosses with the exact same move, the exact same abilities and the exact same things. And when it came to the materia, I feel like it didn't have as much of an impact on what I did as it would have done in the original game. In the original game, I was stacking certain materia types in order to defeat specific bosses and have a wide range of moves that I could use so that I could not be caught off guard. In this one, I just felt like even if I didn't specifically cater towards the weakness of an enemy, they would still probably die to a bunch of different things, and a lot of the time just spamming heals. I honestly think in this game I use Cure more than any other spell, with the next closest being any of the lightning spells, that being Thunder, Fundara, and Fundaga. Which really annoys me because I really wish that they just kept with the old naming system for this game, Fire 1, Fire 2, and Fire 3, just because of the nostalgia of it. But I get it. Final Fantasy games started using those, I think, in 8. So they have been well established in people's kind of minds. But at the same time, I kind of miss the fact that it wasn't that very 1, 2, and 3 kind of thing. But essentially, I don't feel like I was using the full range of materia because I just didn't have to. I could get away with just spamming different attacks unique to each character, and I didn't really use my materia. And this is the whole thing about Final Fantasy VII. The materia is such a core mechanic and such an important thing in the original game that being able to just go through the game basic attacking and then using abilities that each character had just felt a little bit crap, unrewarding. Like, it just felt like I wasn't playing Final Fantasy VII. Because, again, the whole premise is to get your materia leveled up, and this gives you a wide range of abilities. Giving your character abilities that exist outside the materia, while it makes sense that those characters should actually have melee combat skills instead of just punch or slash, it just didn't feel like the materia was as important in this game as it was in the original. And materia is something that I really loved from the original game. The idea that you could equip a materia that had very specific properties, level up, and it would get better as time goes on, and it was a good, rewarding progression system. And this, I kind of just plonked materia on that would probably deal with a lot of enemies and go from there. And this is another kind of problem I found. I used Cure more than anything else. The next one was Bolt, and the reason for that is a lot of the robot enemies wouldn't take much damage from physical attacks, so hitting them with, like, Thunder was one of the primary things you would do. A lot of enemies that had resistances, it honestly didn't feel like they were as important than the robots. The robots used Thunder on them, they were easy. Most other enemies I could wail on until they just fell over. So it didn't feel like I was even needing to use the abilities, even if I wanted to. It just felt like it would be a waste of time to use it, because if you can beat the crap out of someone just by slashing them, why wouldn't you? So it is the one thing I would say about this game that I thought was alright, but could have been done a lot better in my opinion. Now, the gameplay does not just exist as combat. There is a lot of mini-games in Final Fantasy VII Remake, and there's a lot of mini-games in Final Fantasy VII. Some of the ones that I would name is the squatting games, the pull-up games, the freaking dance game that you have to go through. There's also the box smashing mechanics. There is Fort Condor, which in the original game, Fort Condor's little mini game was one of my favorites. I absolutely enjoyed that, so I love the nostalgia from that as well. And all the mini games, for the most part, apart from the box smashing ones and the dancing ones, are all from the original game. The squats, all these kind of things. So again, they've hit that nostalgia button really hard with this. And some of these mini games are frustrating as hell. Like, genuinely, you are spamming button combinations that in theory should be easy. But again, I'm getting older. I'm not as great with the reaction speed as I used to be. And I am like spamming the living shit out of things just to get these button combinations in. And I am happy to say I managed to do every single mini game, and I got a bunch of achievements that a lot of people don't have for certain mini games, like the pull-up ones and the squat ones and all the different things. And I am so proud that I managed to do it, because I, again, am not a top tier gamer. I am just a freaking guy behind the screen playing stuff. And I'm going to be honest, it was rewarding. It was enjoyable. Frustrating. Frustrating as hell, but enjoyable. And I think I enjoyed the minigame side of it more than I enjoyed the combat side of it to some extent, on the basis that the combat just isn't as fun as I remember it. And that's not to say the combat isn't fun, but I think that's probably where the nostalgia part of this whole experience actually is a problem for the game. I have a better version of the combat system in my head as far as I'm concerned. And granted, there's a lot of people out there that will enjoy the action RPG side of it more than I do. But for me, the original combat system was peak. If you could take the combat system from Final Fantasy VII and put it into Final Fantasy VII Remake, I think it would have been the perfect game for me. But I think it's just the dichotomy of it. I have something that I prefer, and it's not the something I prefer, but it's packaged like the something I prefer, and it rubbed me slightly the wrong way. But it was still fun. It just wasn't as fun as I would have had if it was the original system. And again, that is just a me thing. That is not a bad thing. Like, game companies need to evolve, they need to change, they need to do different things, they need to innovate. And granted, this wasn't really an innovation. It was like combining two existing systems together and seeing what happens. And maybe in the rebirth, it'll be improved in that sense. But I did really enjoy the mini games over the combat. I don't know what I can say about it. So, let's sum up and talk about how I feel about this game overall. I think that this game gains a lot from playing the original first. Playing the original Final Fantasy VII, then going to play this. You're going to notice a lot of things, see a lot of things, and understand a lot of things that you wouldn't really understand otherwise, and have context on different characters and different things, and know generally how the story was meant to play out. And you lose that by not playing the original. But conversely, I think if you are a big fan of old school RPGs with the turn-based systems, the ATB system, all that kind of thing, you are going to probably, in turn, spoil the combat system for yourself, because you see what it could have been or what it was, and compared to what it is, I just don't find it as fun. I don't find it as compelling, and I don't find it as engaging. But at the same time, it is still fun. It is still good. You know, it is a thing. You know, I can't really say anything bad about it, apart from it's just not my personal preference. Like, it's not a bad system. I just think there's a better system that has existed and does exist and could have been implemented. And that's just my minor fault with this game, because otherwise it's a perfect example of doing a remake right. And essentially what they've done is either, like, there's two ways a remake can go. Either they stay faithful and make an exact copy of the game, just with better graphics, or they do their own thing and don't make it a replacement for the original. And this game does that perfectly. It doesn't replace the original. It is a sequel. It is literally a sequel to Final Fantasy VII. It is the next generation of games for it. It explores the concept of what if, and what would have happened if this person didn't do this and didn't do that, and what if you went here instead of there before this. And it's a very cool concept, and I really do enjoy it, because it doesn't replace the original. It actually, if anything, encourages you to go back and play it. And this is the thing I love about video games, is sharing the experience with others and speaking about them and talking about my thoughts and my experiences. Because sometimes something you say is a very personal thing. And then sometimes something you say, someone else is like, that's exactly what I thought. And this is like a huge amalgamation of things going on in my head. And I just love Final Fantasy VII. I love Final Fantasy in general. I love this game, I love its original, and I am fairly certain I'm going to love Rebirth and the next game in the series after that. Overall, I think Square has knocked this out of the park, and I would heavily encourage that you play this. I would heavily encourage you to play the Final Fantasy VII original as well, but, you know, it's not for everybody. The graphics are incredibly dated, and the gameplay might not be the speed that you want it in this modern age. Either way, guys, I want to hear your thoughts on it. What do you guys think about Final Fantasy VII's remake? And do you think that it achieved what they set out to do? Do you think they shouldn't have bothered making it? Do you think that you wish they'd went harder with it? Like, what do you guys think? Either way, with that, I'll catch you all next time. Somewhere. I don't know what game I'll be playing. Let's say in the Wasteland.